What's up guys, Marshall Coding here. In this video, we are implementing Django and Nuxt.js Authentication app by using JWT tokens. If you want to see more of these contents, please subscribe to my channel. Now let's dive into the code. So we will first start building the backend part and then we will move into the frontend part. Now let's create two folders. One of them is server and the other one is client. So server will be used for Django's side and the client will be used for Nuxt.js side. Now let's go into the server folder and set up our Django project. First, we need to create a virtual environment. Yes, our virtual environment is created. And let's activate this environment. Let's install Python Django. Let's create requirements.txt file. So requirement.txt file will contain the packages that we are using in our Django project. Now we see that Django is here. Now let's create our Django project. Okay, here we see our project named core. In our Django project, we will need several packages. So let's get started downloading them. So the first package we will need is Django Rest Framework. Django Rest Framework is used to deal with REST API in Django. So first we need to install that package by running pip install Django Rest Framework. Now the second package we will use is Django course headers. The next package we will install is Django course headers. So course headers will be used to access the resources on other domains. So let's install that package. The next package we will use is simple JWT. So simple JWT package is used to work with JWT tokens. Now the packages are installed. Let's set up them. So in order to work with the Django Rest Framework, we need to add this line of code into the install apps in settings file. The same procedure should be done for course headers package also. Now we need to configure our REST framework settings. So we are modifying the default REST framework settings by defining a dictionary called REST framework. And then we need to include REST framework simple JWT authentication in order to be able to work with that. We need to also configure the course headers package. So we need to include these two lines of codes in the middleware part of settings file. We also need to define from which hosts we have to get the requests. So the course allowed origins should be HTTP localhost 3000 port. So this endpoint is relevant for our next Nuxt.js app. It means that our Nuxt.js app will run on this endpoint. So we need to allow this API endpoint. Next, we can configure our simple JWT package. So here in the settings part of the JWT website, we can find the basic JWT settings. So let's include that settings into our project. Now here we see some default settings. For instance, access token lifetime. It means that for how many minutes our access token should be available. So the default setting is 5 minutes, and refresh token lifetime is 1 day. We also have default auth header types, so the bearer token will be used in our project. We also have token claim, which is in our project user ID. We'll also add additional settings for token claims, but user ID is enough. Now this settings here imports some additional libraries of Python. So let's import that libraries. The first library was time delta. And the next thing is this settings.secret key. So the secret key in our Django project is this secret key. Instead of settings.secret key, we can just use our secret key. Now for now, we're done with the project settings. And let's create a new app named account. So this account app will be used for our project authentication part. Let's add this app to the installed apps. Next, we are configuring the URLs part of our project. So let's add account URLs into our project. For this, we will use include. Now this line of code will include all the URLs existing in account app, and the endpoint prefix will be API/auth. So for example, we will access the account API as API/auth/login or API/auth/register. Now let's go into the account URLs. Right now, we don't have any URLs file. Let's create a URLs file. So the app name will be account. The app name should be equal to the namespace here we define. And based on this app name, we will use dynamic URLs in our project. Now let's copy and paste the URLs code from the core project. Right now, we don't need any of these paths. For now, we will keep our URL file empty. For now, we will keep our URL patterns array empty. Now let's create our user models. Right now, I'm in account folder models.py file. By default, Django has some built-in authentication classes to define user models. So these are base user manager and abstract base user classes. Now we will use these classes in order to create our custom user model. Now let's create an account model. So this model will have to inherit from abstract base user. So the account will have email, the maximum length is set by 60 characters and it should be unique. Next, the user will have username. The maximum length is set by 255 characters and it is also unique. But in your case, you can change it to either unique or not unique. Let's also add is admin. So default will be false. So these three fields are also necessary. The most important one is super user. Based on that field, we will determine if the user is super user or not. But the other two is admin and is active is actually, it's up to you. You can either use it or not. I preferred using it. Let's create also created at and updated at. An additional field also can be a last login. Indicating at what time we have logged in. The next thing is username field. So this field is important in order to by which field we will log in. Default is username field, but we will use email field. So during the login, we will use our email and password. Another field will be required fields. Required fields defines the fields that will be prompted when we create a super user. So when we create a super user, we will need to fill username, email, and password fields at least. Let's also define our string representation of model. So in our case, we will use username field as our string representation. We need to also create a manager for our account model. So let's create that manager. So the manager will be called account manager, and this will extend from base user manager. It will have a create user method, Now you may ask why we need account manager and why we need create user field method. So account manager will be used when we create a new user. So when we create a new user, we will first check if it has email and username fields. If not, we will raise errors. Then we will normalize the email field, and we also include username. After the user is created, we will set the password and we will save the user. And we need to also define a method for creating a super user. So this is a little bit different from the create user method. Again, we're using normalized email. And when we create a super user, by default, the user is admin should be true. And the super that is super user should also be true. After we create our manager, we have to call this manager inside the user model. And we call it by defining a variable named objects. Now the user model is done for now. Let's create a serializer. So the serializers are important for modifying how the user data should be accepted when we create a user. And it will act kind of as a validation logic. Let's import serializers library from Rest Framework. Now let's create a registration serializer. Now you may ask what this line of code means. So, when we create an account, we will fill the form. When we create an account, we will fill the registration form. In that registration form, we will be asked to fill username, email, and password fields. In addition, we need to confirm that password second time. So this password2 field will represent the confirm password field in the registration form. Here we define that password2 should be char field, and its input type should be password, and it is only writable. So it means that we will never be able to read password data when we access user. Now define meta class. Here we will be defined what model we will be using. So the model we will be using will be settings.auth_user model. So auth_user model will be defined inside our settings file in core app. Let's define it under default auto field. So auth_user model will be the account model inside account app. Now let's include the settings library. Let's continue. So the fields we want to get are email, username, password, password2. So these are the fields that we will fill when we are in the registration page. So this is the extra keyword arguments. So we're defining that the password is also write only. Instead of overriding the password field here, we would just use extra keywords to save some time. In this serializer, we need a save method. So this save method is default for all serializers, and we will override this method suitable for our authentication logic. So first, we are creating a new user instance by using email and username. And we're getting the values after the validation is done. We also get the passwords. Now we will compare those passwords. If password 1 is not equal to password 2, then we will raise a validation error. Otherwise, we will set our new password. And we will return the user. So this was the register serializer. Let's create another serializer for getting the user data. Let's call it account serializer. Now the fields we want to get is ID, username, and email. And that was our whole serialization logic. Now let's create the views for authentication. We will first start with register view. Let's import our register serializer. We will check if the serializer is valid. If it's not, we will raise exception. After that, we will save the serializer in the user. So whenever we create a new instance, we need to return 201 status as a response. Now let's import the response from Rest Framework. And let's also import the status. We also need to define a few permissions for our register view. So first of all, we won't only accept post requests. Let's import the decorators. We don't need any specific permission class for this method, for this view. That's why we will only include empty array. Let's test our API. Before testing our API, let's run the migrations. Let's define a URL for register view. Let's run the server. I prefer testing the API in post mode. So our API endpoint will be localhost/API auth and register. And the request type will be post. Let's fill the body of request. So we got error. It says that the page not found. Let's see why. So the problem was was in urls.py file in core app. We need to add / after auth. Let's test the API again. Now we had another error. Let's see what had happened. I found the reason of the problem. So the problem is settings.auth user model. Let's change it to directly account model. Let's test the API again. Now we got 201 status with created message. So it means our API works. Let's get the user. In order to get the current user, we need to first log in. Let's create a function for login. And actually, Django JWT Rest Framework package has built-in login functionality. So let's use it. I will create a new path for login. So we will include a new view called token. We will use JWT package built-in token obtain pair view class method. We need to define a serializer class. Let's create that serializer. We need to define a getToken method, which will be used to create a token for our user. We can add custom claims to the token. In this case, I would like to add username as a claim. So our token will contain user ID and username information. Let's create a URL for login. Let's test this API. I will create a new request. The URL will end with login. And the data will be email, and password. You see, we get refresh token and access token. So the API works. Now let's create functionality for getting user data. Now let's create a detailed view for our account. We need to define some decorators for these views as well. So only get method can use this endpoint. And the permission class will be is authenticated, because only authenticated users can use this endpoint. Let's import REST permissions. Let's create a URL for this view. Let's test the API. I will create a new request. And here I will define a header for authorization. I will use access token. So here we got error 401 unauthorized. It says the token is invalid or expired. If you remember, in the settings file, we had the token lifetime. So by default, in our project, the token lifetime was 5 minutes. Let's increase it to 30 minutes. Let's get new tokens. I will replace the new token. We got the same error as the previous one. Let's go to the serializers. Let's use account model. Here we get the answer. We get our user data. Let's create a functionality for refresh token. So the refresh tokens are used to get new access tokens when the lifetime of access token expires. JWT package has built-in refresh token functionality. So let's use it. Let's test the API. I will create a new request. The request method will be post, and the body will include refresh token. Let's copy the refresh token. So we get a new access token. Let's create a function for logout. Simple JWT package has built-in logout functionality. Let's use it. In the documentation, it's called blacklist app. In order to use it, we need to include it in the installed apps. Then we need to create a URL for that. Let's change the URL endpoint. Before testing the API, we need to run the migrations again. Let's test the API. I will create a new request. The request method will be post request. We need to send the refresh token as a data. So we get success status 200. In order to test if the API works correctly, we can use refresh endpoint to get a new access token. So we got error. It says the token is blacklist. It means that our logout worked. So currently, we're done with our APIs and backend. So let's get into the frontend part. Now let's create a new Nuxt.js app. So first, we're going into client folder. In order to create a Nuxt app, we need to run a command npm init Nuxt app, and then we can name our app. So let's give a name to our project. Programming language will be JavaScript. Package manager is npm. I'm more comfortable with Bootstrap Vue. The template engine HTML. I would like to use Axios for HTTP client. We don't need any testing framework. We will use universal SSR. Let's choose server Node.js hosting. I will continue with jsconfig.json. Version control system will be Git. Now our project is installed. Let's run our project. Let's open the project. Let's open the project. We see our Nuxt.js frontend. Let's create pages for authentication. Inside the pages folder, I will create auth folder. Inside auth folder, I will create pages for login and register. And I will also create a page for user data. Now let's work on our authentication logic. In order to implement authentication, we will use official package called Nuxt.auth. Nuxt.auth package is let's install Nuxt.auth package. So the Nuxt.auth package is added to our project. Let's configure it. In the official documentation, we have this default options for authentication. We can find it in the website under the schemes section and local. Here we have auth object with strategy local. Local means that we will store the token in local storage. So let's use this object. We need to import it inside nuxt.config file. So let's review it. We see that we are using a token. So the property field will define the name of token. If you remember, the name of token was access. By default, the type of the token is bearer, and it's required, so we can remove this. The name of the user instance will be user. And here we are defining the endpoints. So the endpoints are pretty much same. API auth login for login, API auth logout for logout endpoint, API auth user for user data endpoint. If you remember, we also had refresh tokens. So in order to be able to use refresh token, we need to add a scheme key. So the value for scheme key will be refresh. In the official documentation, we have ready-made options for refresh tokens. We see that here we have to include refresh token object. We can change the property name to refresh. And the maximum age was 1 day in the backend. So let's remove this therapy. The maximum age for the token was 30 minutes, so we can include it. And let's add the endpoint. Right now, we're done with the logic of authentication. Let's build the pages. In the documentation, we have built-in login template. Let's use it. I will change this submit method. And instead of username field, we're using email. Here we see we are using this auth.loginWith method to log in to our website. As you see, here we are using login with method to log in, and we are sending our login data as email and password. After getting a successful response, I would like to redirect to the user page. I'm using dynamic route, so I have to use auth username. I prefer using dynamic routes. It means that I'm using the name key and the value will be auth user. And I have used replace method in order to prevent the user go back with browser back button. Let's fill the register view page. I will copy this code and paste it in the register view. I will add username and confirm password fields as well. Here, let's change the input types. I will also change the input type in login page. Let's add these data into the login object. After successful request, I will redirect the user to login page. But before that, we need to create a register function. First, I will change the data object as register. I will remove this line of code. We will use Axios package. In order to use Axios package, we need to define In order to use the Axios package, we need to define the base URL in Nuxt.config file. So the base URL of our application will be the backend URL /API. Here we're accessing auth/register endpoint and we are sending the register data. And if we get a successful response, we will redirect ourselves into the auth login page. Let's create the user page. I will copy and paste the same code. I will delete most of the code. In order to see the logged in user, we can define a few computer properties. First is authenticated. Here we will return if this user Here we will return if this user is authenticated. Next, we can get the authenticated user. Let's create a functionality for logout. So logout functionality is done through this auth logout. This will take our current strategy and it will log out automatically by using the endpoint defined here. After successfully logging out, we would like to redirect to the login page. Let's put it into a try-catch block. We can also restrict the access to this page by using a middleware. So this will prevent the unauthenticated users to access user page. Only authenticated users can access this page. We can also restrict the access to register and login pages. So this will prevent authenticated users to access the register and login pages again. Let's create links to access these pages. I will remove tutorial component from the index view. Let's test the application. Let's go to the register page and create a new account. We came across an error. Let's see what it is. Here, we forgot to change the login objects to register. Let's refresh. Let's fill the form. We are successfully registered and we are redirected to the login page. Let's log in. It seems that we had a problem. Let's see what it is. It says cannot read properties of undefined login with. It means that our Nuxt auth is not initiated. Let's see how to solve it. So in our Nuxt config file, we need to declare it. Nuxt auth next. Let's refresh the page. So I came across with another problem. In order to solve this problem, we need to include transpile defu. Before testing those pages, we need to make a slight modification to the pages. we need to call middleware auth in both login and register pages. So these two lines of code will protect the page from access. Let's check the pages. We see that when we access the login page, we are redirected to the register page. Let's check the register page. Again, we are redirected to the register page. And the buttons here also doesn't work. Let's go to the user page again. And let's log out. And let's access the user page again. We see that we are automatically redirected to the login page, but the page is not found because we are redirected to the wrong page. Let's fix it. In order to solve this issue, we need to define redirect URLs inside the auth object. So in our case, I would like to redirect to /auth/login page, and my callback is also the same. Let's test it. If you still have problems with the redirections, probably the problem is related to the store. We need to initiate empty index.js Vuex store in order to work with the redirections correctly. So we need to just define empty state, getters, mutations, and actions inside the index.js files under store folder. Let's access the auth user page. We see that now we're correctly redirected to the login page. Let's log in again and test it again. Let's log out. Let's go back to the user page again. And we're again in the login page. So that was the end of Nuxt.js and Django authentication tutorial. So that was a very minimalistic approach to the project. In the upcoming videos, we will enhance this project by implementing social logins such as logging with Google, GitHub, and etc.